I recently received an excellent comment about depersonalization on my Changing Faces video, my last video, depending on how you're watching this. And essentially, this viewer used subliminals to change their appearance, which worked, and it actually started working very fast for them as they were shifting realities. And then they started manifesting a better life or a better home and more money. And they received a better home, and they were in the process of upgrading other parts of their existence when they started experiencing very disturbing depersonalization and derealization. And they observed that they thought that there was a disconnect between the person that they were seeing versus how they viewed themselves versus what they internally thought that they deserved, which I thought was incredibly insightful, because oftentimes I get comments and questions from people trying to reality shift that want to go too fast, and they get a little upset with me sometimes. Not everybody, but sometimes I actually get a little bit of hate when I say it's not a good idea, because the psyche is very delicate. And there's almost this desperation of I want to, it needs to happen now. And I understand that, because when you start to get a taste of reality shifting, and especially if you're in some pretty circumstances, it's so enticing. And if you're up for like this intergalactic adventure, it's just so fun, right? And so the desire can outpace the actual ability to reality shift. And the reason this happens is because if you've ever looked into a mirror and not recognized yourself, or if you've ever been walking around the world feeling weird and disconnected and almost like you're in a movie of somebody else's life, it's extremely upsetting and destabilizing, and in some cases can have a ricochet of an emotional reaction that can lead to depressive episodes, can lead to adjustment disorders, can lead to actual psychiatric disturbances. And depersonalization and derealization itself is actually a psychiatric disturbance. You can go to a psychiatrist and be medicated for this. The DSM has got you covered when it comes to seeing yourself as a broken human being that can't have any out of the ordinary experiences without it meaning something terrible, And I don't mean to pick on the DSM entirely, but for the most part I do, because it bothers me that we can't talk about this yet in the mainstream. And if you experience depersonalization or derealization for going too fast and reality shifting, then you get a pretty nasty label that has the potential to give you a stigma and affects the way you see yourself and how your friends and your family see you. When if we understood reality shifting from a broader perspective and could see, and this was my reply to this commenter, could see that more integration time is needed. It's an indication that you're going too fast. It's really simple. All you have to do is just slow down a little bit and let your psyche catch up. Let your eyes get used to your new appearance, sometimes your new circumstances, your new life. And once you go through that process of integration, it's a similar thing. It's a similar process with psychedelics. The real work actually begins before you take a psychedelic journey, if you're using it as a sacred medicine tool. If you're using it as a party experience or for fun, and those are viable reasons, I'm not trying to discount those, then what I'm about to say doesn't apply. But if you're treating it like a sacred journey, as though you are going to correspond with the consciousness that is embedded in the life force capsule of whatever plant medicine you are utilizing, then that conversation actually starts before you take the psychedelic journey, before you go on the psychedelic journey. So as a psychedelic facilitator, I tell people this, and usually it's when we decide that then we wait for the timing to work itself out, and the work already begins, and the subconscious will start talking to you, your dreams will start talking to you, you'll have insights. It's a really great idea to journal. It's fantastic to journal. I know some people are not into it. You can make voice notes if you want to, but it allows the subconscious to speak to you. It allows you to channel messages that your ordinary beta wave brain, if you're in a Western society where the beta waves are predominantly valued, like get shit done, like go, 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 go. If you're predominantly there, you're not going to be able to receive some of the messages from beyond. And so by journaling or by talking in voice notes to yourself, you capture the ability to shift your brainwave state, especially if you're laying down and you're relaxed. If you have music on, you allow for the receptivity to allow your subconscious mind and messages from beyond to come to you. It's like a waking meditation. And then when you go on the psychedelic journey, afterwards, some of the most important parts and where the most work comes in is in the integration time period, because you'll receive this flood of downloads. You'll receive so much from it, right? That the human mind can't possibly digest it. It's like eating a really large meal. And the human mind has to go through its own process of digesting the different parts of it. And the same thing happens with reality shifting, is that as you start to upgrade your consciousness from binary linear consciousness to quantum consciousness, and you open up to these potentials and these options, and you start moving through it, there's a process of reconciliation through your reality shifting and selection methods. You have to update your internal database about what is going on. And if you are heavily entrenched in a unidimensional existence, this means that you're going to need more integration time. And even if you wanted to go faster, your psyche wouldn't be able to really handle it. And so as you are reality shifting, it's important to plateau your experience and to allow the mind to really process the fact that you are indeed reality shifting and it is indeed true. Because when you go too fast, you disrupt some internal mechanism that, even as a neuroscientist, I don't think we know what this is. Because technically, where I received my training in mainstream neuroscience, this was not a thing. Reality shifting was not a thing. And I'd get laughed out of academia. And, because at that space and time point, it was heavily binary, reductionist, materialistic ways of thought. And this is why there's not a lot of research on it. I know there are people that make content about research on it, but I'm telling you, the last time I looked, there's not actual research. Now, there are anecdotal studies and reports, myself included. I've included some of those, but this would not be publishable in a legitimate peer-reviewed journal. Anyway, so the point is that while our society is undergoing this upgrade, we have to let others catch up, right? We have to let our mind catch up. And let me just give you a story. I, as a psychedelic facilitator, am associated with a couple of groups, I paused because things are changing in my life and I'm moving away from those groups because we're not in alignment. But when I first started, I started socializing with people that were also in the industry, identifying who were the thought leaders, training myself on harm reduction practices and best practices and what were people saying. And etc., etc. And there's this one person, this content creator, who has made it his life mission to teach about the harm of psychedelics, which initially I was very receptive to, because as a psychedelic facilitator, the last thing you want is to harm people, right? Or to give people traumatic experiences. So hearing about others' traumatic experiences is very helpful to train you to understand, like, what are the pitfalls to look out for? What are the obstacles? And this is how I develop some of the practices, like no touching people without asking. And if I do, then it's like platonic touching, because there is this whole industry weirdness of like psychedelic facilitators having sexual relations with their people while on psychedelics, and that just seems like a recipe for disaster, right? It just really does. So by seeing some of these trauma stories, you can, as a facilitator, create a program that is safe, that is nurturing and welcoming. So what's fascinating is that I originally met this guy randomly before I was in psychedelics. I met him in the backyard of this conscious community randomly, where we just talked for like an hour and a half about, all things. And then years later, fast forward, I'm networking and I come across his podcast. I come across him and we reconnect. And initially I was really excited, because I was like, what are the chances that I would just randomly meet this person, while I was traveling in the world in this backyard of this place, and we have this, insightful talk. And then I start watching his content, and what I observe is a really interesting phenomenon that I would like to share with you. He has a horrific experience with ayahuasca. And it is so terrible that, it wasn't actually terrible when he was undergoing the psychedelic experience. It was very powerful. It was very intense. It blew his mind. And he perceived that he actually was inserted into another reality layer. Now, because ayahuasca shamans are not reality shifting coaches, they didn't integrate this experience with him, and he left feeling as though he was disconnected from his former identity and disconnected from his life, and spent the next several days feeling very, very uncomfortable and really, really like a wild animal trapped in a human body, is the way he kind of describes it. Not his words, but he was scared and he was really shook. And he had no way to integrate the experience. So he called a friend and they helped to ground him back in his old identity. And since then, he has now made it his life purpose and his mission to convince everybody how harmful psychedelics are because of that experience. And I think that this is a wonderful example of why integration is so important. Because when people have the experience of shifting realities, and it is extreme enough that they notice and they feel it and they feel discombobulated from it, they have depersonalization and derealization that would qualify for a DSM diagnosis. They could go to a doctor, get a diagnosis, and get a prescription. And when, however, they are trained in reality shifting and or are experienced with it, then they know how to handle it. They're like, okay, I'm going too fast, or I'm pushing the edge too much. I need to pull myself back, or I feel strong enough. Let's see if my psyche breaks. I've done that before. I'm like, okay, let's see how far we can go with it. I think I can handle it. And I could, but there were a couple of occasions on my journey that I was like, reaching out, phoning friends, like, help, I think I've gone too far. I've seen the Matrix and the Matrix has seen me and I'm scared. True story. They helped me to ground myself. And some of those techniques are in the grounding and ungrounding, or the anchoring and de-anchoring episode. So when you are reality shifting, you start to have these wild experiences that when you go too far, you will experience depersonalization. And if your consciousness and your sensory system is not adept to process this level of information, it is extremely uncomfortable and potentially very disruptive to your functioning, which is why you get a DSM diagnosis. All of the diagnoses are contingent upon your lack of functioning. So when you stop functioning in binary society, that's when everybody freaks out. When you stop calling your friends and your family, and you can't hold down a job, and you get kicked out of places, then you're being pushed to the fringe of society, and God forbid you try to exit into a new society. People try to pull you back, and they do so with hospitals and doctors and DSM diagnoses, because that's what everybody's used to. It's a culture. It's not anybody being evil. That's how you handle situations in a binary society when you see people going off the edge. And so for this guy, I actually challenged him a little bit about this depersonalization, because he wrote this beautiful article about it. And I said, well, hey, maybe you're reality shifting, and maybe you actually shifted into another world. But he is closed to that level of processing information, and is also, probably because he's not open to it, hasn't been exposed to the educational content that we have, right? Potentially. And as a result, he was uneducated, naive is what we would say, or a layperson. And so he has no framework for reality shifting. He has no framework for reality except one, and that is there is only one plane of existence. So it makes sense that now when he was shaken out of that framework, and he didn't have a framework for which to hold on to and build into his perceptual awareness, his psyche broke. And it was serious enough for him to start a crusade against psychedelics to warn about the harm of it. And for me, I see it as a recapitulation of binary consciousness that is afraid of awakening beyond where it has originated from. And so our conversation and me challenging him was fruitless. And I could see that he was not interested in exploring multi-worlds. And I left that alone. I respected his closed-mindedness about it, and respected his crusade to raise the alarms of other people against psychedelics. And I think it's interesting because you'll find this resistance when you try to talk about your reality shifting to people who are not ready to transfer their consciousness into other avatars, when they're very, very heavily set on staying in their singular point of existence of the same awareness, right? You'll find this level of resistance, and people may even crusade against you. I'm not saying that they will, but it's possible. And they might try to force a DSM diagnosis on you, even, behind your back. And I say, let them and walk away. Because people are entitled to their own worldview. And if you try to shake them out of a worldview too early, and they don't have the proper support to integrate a new worldview, then it's actually harmful. And by giving them space to observe you from afar, like maybe they start to notice that your face is changing or your life is changing, well, they're going to have a different explanation for that than you are as a reality shifter. Let them have their explanation. Let them go in peace. And let the timelines diverge and split, and keep on your merry way, especially with seeing how things are unfolding in our society today, assuming that you and I are sharing the same space point. We're not sharing the same time point. I pre-recorded this one, but assuming that you exist in the same society that I do, we're undergoing a lot of change and a lot of a revolution. And there is going to be a bifurcation. Others have talked about this as well, of certain timelines and certain planes of existence. And those that are truly not ready to awaken beyond a binary linear existence will go towards a group that shares their perspective and their worldview. Because the alarm clock is ringing and we don't have any more snooze buttons or snooze windows. It's like our third time. We've been snoozing. We've, like everybody has heard about AI and taking over jobs, but not everybody has started thinking about the new skills or the new job that they're going to get when AI takes over their job. So understandably, they're going to be rudely awoken by that shift. And it's better to be out of the way when chaos starts to go down. And so if you start to feel depersonalized, the key is to slow down. Let yourself integrate the experience. Let your cognition go through the process of upgrading, your reality shifting, and then continue on. So listen, I am a reality shifting coach. If you need help on your reality shifting journey, or if you're interested in working one-on-one, please feel free to reach out to me. You can email me at sacredjourneyproductions@gmail.com. Okay, we'll talk soon.